Khash, Saghafi, Liberty Home Mortgage. And what are we talking about today? This is another scenario when the appraisal comes in short. So watch this one here. So this is a short appraisal. That means it comes in for less than the purchase price. So I'll give you an example. I just had this happen on a transaction, and this happens. It doesn't happen a lot, believe it or not, but it definitely happens. And I'll tell you this one, when it happens to you as the real estate agent on the transaction you're doing, it sucks. Or when it happens to you, the buyer, or you, the seller, okay? Pay attention to this one. If you're buying a home and the appraisal comes in short, I'm gonna show you the scenario that just happened to me, so watch this one, okay? So I have a purchase where the purchase price was $325,000. That was the purchase price, okay? So this is the purchase price. Purchase price, okay? The appraised value came in at $295,000. This was the appraisal, okay? So follow me on this one. This just happened, okay? So if this happens, especially real estate agents, you have to know how to work with this. So the purchase price is $325,000 and the house appraises at $295,000. This just happened to me. As a matter of fact, we just closed the transaction yesterday. So it's still closed. So watch this one. In this transaction, the seller came down to $305,000. So the seller came all the way down to $305,000, but here's the problem. The appraisal was $295,000, okay? I'm gonna ultimately show you that you have 5 choices when this happens, okay? There's 5 choices. Let me show you what happened to this one ultimately. The seller came down to $305,000. The appraisal's $295,000. The value of the home from the perspective of a mortgage lender is the lesser between the appraised value and the purchase price. So in other words, it's being bought for $325,000. It appraises at $295,000. All of my numbers as a mortgage lender work off of $295,000. Now the seller said, hey, listen, I'll come all the way down to $305,000. I won't go a dollar below that, okay? It doesn't matter from my perspective. The value is $295,000. Now my buyer was going with a conventional loan and putting 5% down, okay? So what that means is instead of 5% of $325,000, now the buyer's putting down 5% of $295,000, okay? However, there's still a disparity here. The seller came down to $305,000 and the appraisal's $295,000. So the buyer has to put down the minimum 5% of $295,000 here, and the difference between $295,000 and $305,000, which is an additional $10,000. If you do the math on all of this, this comes out to about 5% of $295,000. It's not quite $15,000, but I don't have my calculator, and I'm talking in writing sideways, God knows, call it 15 grand, plus another 10. That means the buyer needed a total of about $25,000, okay? So they needed the minimum down, 5% of that number, plus the shortage, the difference here, okay? The seller came down, but not all the way. They came down to $305,000. So when an appraisal comes in short, here are the choices. Choice 1 is you can actually go back to the appraiser, provide them with different comparables, and say to them, can you use these comparables? Maybe then when they change out the comps that are on the appraisal, the value goes back to $325,000, who knows, okay? Choice 1 is go to the appraiser and argue. Choice 2, the seller comes all the way down to the appraised value. That's choice 2, didn't happen here. Choice 3, the buyer covers the entire difference plus the minimum required off of the lower amount. That didn't happen, the buyer was not willing to do that. Choice 4, the seller comes down and whatever the remaining difference is, the buyer covers it in addition to the minimum required, okay? That's what occurred here. The loan closed yesterday. The last choice, of course, is cancel everything, all bets are off. The buyer paid for an appraisal, it's non-refundable, but in those cases when that happens, I always tell people that's the best $500 you've ever spent, okay? Because it saved you, God knows, getting into a bad situation possibly. So these are the choices that happen when the appraisal comes in short. Okay, that's a live deal that just happened to me, and this stuff happens not a lot, but it's something to pay attention to. Make sure you keep following my videos. I have hundreds of videos on this stuff. Follow it, especially if you're buying or especially if you're a real estate agent. This is what you learn. I'll catch you on the next one.